I'm talking about the My Aged Care Provider Specialisation Verification Initiative today. I'll outline what it is, why it was implemented and how to apply, particularly from a culturally and linguistically diverse perspective. The Royal Commission into Aged Care Quality and Safety had as one of its recommendations, part of Recommendation 30, that as a condition of approval or continued approval, providers should verify to the satisfaction of the system governor, that's the department, that the provider has proper grounds for making any representation of being able to provide specialised services for groups of people with diverse backgrounds and life experiences. So that recommendation came about because the Royal Commission, commissioners and advocates considered that it wasn't appropriate that aged care providers would be making claims to specialise without any mechanism for checking those claims. So hence the recommendation. The diverse groups that this measure pertains to are the so-called special needs groups as defined in the Aged Care Act. So it's culturally and linguistically diverse. That's the focus of our meeting today, but also Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, people who live in rural and remote areas, financially disadvantaged people, veterans, people who are homeless or at risk of becoming homeless, people who are in institutional or out-of-home care, called care leavers, parents separated from their children by forced adoption or removal, and people who are LGBTI. And of course, many people fall within more than one of those categories. It is worth noting that other specialisations published on My Aged Care, including health conditions and faith and language, so the language spoken, are not part of the initiative. So those claims are not verified. The objective of the measure is to ensure more reliable information is available to older people with diverse backgrounds and life experiences, as well as their family and carers when they're making decisions about their aged care provider. So it means that older people can find the services that are right for them. That's also an important objective. The mechanism of it is through an application and assessment process to verify the claims made. Aged care providers in any setting may choose to offer specialised services for people. So residential aged care, home care, CHSP, any aged care provider can choose to offer specialised services for people with diverse experiences, backgrounds and characteristics who identify with one or more of the groups defined as special needs. To claim specialisation, providers need to deliver care that's sensitive to the needs of these individuals, that goes beyond the standard obligations of the aged care quality standards. I'll take you through the requirements in a moment. Applying is voluntary, but if an aged care provider wants to claim on My Aged Care to specialise in providing care to one or more diverse needs groups, they do need to satisfy the criteria set out in the framework. Having specialisation verification claims published on My Aged Care will make it easier for older people to find services that meet their needs. And for you as providers, the people who need your services will be able to find them. So that gives you a market advantage as well. So there's a framework to guide the application process. It's a two-tiered approach to evidence requirements. For some specialisations, such as LGBTI, there's a Tier 1 criteria, which is that you have a rainbow tick. For other specialisations like culturally and linguistically diverse, there's Tier 2 criteria. So there's actually 11 of those for the culturally and linguistically diverse specialisation. And you only need to meet 4. So you can choose which 4 of the 11 that you would like to provide evidence for and apply to meet that requirement. So if there is a Tier 1 criterion, you only have to meet that. Otherwise, you need to meet 4 Tier 2 criteria. Some of the specialisations, like financially and socially disadvantaged groups, don't have 4 Tier 2 criteria, in which case you need to meet all of them that there are. I think there's only 2 in that case. Let's have a look at the framework and particularly the criteria for the culturally and linguistically diverse specialisation. So you need to meet 4 out of the 11 Tier 2 criteria, and here's a little sample of 4 of them. just to give you a feel for the types of things that you need to address. I'll run through on the left-hand side. The first one, the provider is run by a recognised CALD community organisation. And then there's evidence required, which I'll go through on the next slide when we get to it. Another possible criteria you could apply for is that one or more staff members is from a CALD background, reflecting the cultural and linguistic background of aged care recipients, and are well resourced and supported by management to act as champions within the organisation. Another possibility is there are established connections and regular engagement between the provider and a community organisation, which best represents the cultural and linguistic demographic of the aged care recipients. And another one is that at least 90% of staff have completed annual training in culturally appropriate aged care delivery and cultural capability. There's also a criteria which is seeking the feedback from the consumers. So that one is that the consumers report the care received is appropriate and meets their unique needs. So a provider can choose to use that criteria as well, in which case the aged care assessor will talk to the care recipients directly. So this slide is looking at the detailed evidence requirements, which is quite small text, so I won't go through it in too much detail, but just to give you a flavour that there are detailed evidence requirements for each of the criteria. For example, let's look at the top one, that the provider regularly recognises and supports participation in relevant cultural celebrations and days of cultural significance. So the evidence required for this one is a description of the provider's recognition of or participation in or support for the relevant events in the last 12 months with the supporting evidence. And then the last column here gives you an indication of what sort of evidence is being required here. So the provider needs to provide details of the cultural celebrations or events and a description of your recognition or participation and, the number or proportion of care recipients participating. And the supporting evidence examples of these are communications to care recipients about the events, acknowledgement of support or participation by an external organisation, or a care recipient feedback about the celebration. So all of these sorts of things are evidence to meet the evidence requirements for this criteria. And each of the criteria have evidence requirements, and the detailed evidence requirement document on our website is intended to help you meet the requirements and understand what they are. So this slide is only giving the example of 3 criteria, but the detailed evidence requirements covers all of them, all 11 of them. So you can have a look at that and see which ones, might be more suitable for your organisation to use to apply for the criteria. Now, this slide is what the consumer will see and where specialisations appear. So on the My Aged Care website, they'll be looking at the Find a Provider part of it, and they'll be searching for a provider that can help them in a particular area. So here we've put in an example of Philip in the ACT choosing a care type of an aged care home or whatever the care type is. And then directly below that is where they can search for specialised care, and it has the boxes with all of the so-called special needs groups. So the diverse groups are listed. They can tick as many boxes as they need to or want to. We've circled it in red for culturally and linguistically diverse, but it's quite likely that they'll be looking for more than one criteria. So if there's any services that meet those requirements, then it'll come up with a tick and an explanation about what that means. So it'll be indicating that this service has been verified to provide culturally and linguistically diverse care or LGBTI care or whatever the case may be. In February 2023, just over a year ago, any unverified specialisation claims were removed from the My Aged Care website. So all of the claims that are up there now have gone through the verification process. In total, we have had 343 verified culturally and linguistically diverse specialisations under the measure. As you can see, there's probably slightly more than half of those from Victoria, and then New South Wales is the next most prevalent, followed by Queensland, South Australia, WA, ACT, and Tasmania. And we haven't yet had any applications verified from the Northern Territory. I would say that these numbers, the 343, and then this breakdown here that you can see, it's not very many when you consider that a third of people aged over 65 are from a CALD background. The numbers are quite low. So I would encourage you to consider applying, and I hope that this is indicating that it's worthwhile. And the next slide I'll go through in a minute, the process for applying. So the first step is that the provider submits an application through the My Aged Care Service and Support portal. So you would have looked at the evidence requirements and the detailed evidence requirements in doing that, but the portal steps you through what's required, and you're able to upload documents. And then Australian Healthcare Associates is the assessor organisation that we've engaged to do the assessments. So they'll review the application and follow up with the provider where required. The third step is if you have wanted to seek the feedback of your aged care recipients, then the assessor organisation, Australian Healthcare Associates, would seek that feedback from the aged care recipients directly, not involving the aged care provider, to maintain confidentiality. And then AHA would send an email to the provider notifying them that the application is finalised, and they'll do that within 28 days of receiving the application, and often earlier than that. And then verified specialisation claims are published on the provider's My Aged Care profile within 24 hours after they've been verified. So it's quite a streamlined, smooth process, and not too onerous. We haven't had feedback that's too onerous. So again, I would encourage you to participate. Just before I finish, I will just tell you a little anecdote about the importance of participating in this. I ran a webinar last year with the LGBTI Silver Rainbow training partners. So they deliver training to aged care providers to meet the needs of LGBTI care recipients. And I took them through all of this. And one of the training participants said that they were aware of it, but there weren't very many specializations that had been claimed for LGBTI. And in fact, they had been sitting next to an older person and said to them, let's find a service for you, and you can find a service that's LGBTI friendly. Let's have a look. So they looked on the search facility that I just showed you before, and nothing came up. And the older person just said, oh, well, okay, it looks like aged care isn't for me. So they were really encouraging providers to get on board with this, because otherwise older people get the sense that their service is not for them, which is not what we want them to feel. So this is one way that you can make people feel seen and heard, and you can choose the CALD specialisation, the LGBTI specialisation, any of the others. They're hopefully not too onerous to meet the requirements, and I really encourage you to participate. The framework is on our department's website, the detailed evidence requirements, there's a provider guidance manual, and also the independent assessor has a 1300 number available to help providers with applications. So any questions that you have. And there's their website address and their 1300 number. And then below that is our inbox if you have any questions of the department. So that was a quick whiz through my aged care specialisation verification, why it's important, and hopefully giving you a sense that it's not onerous. Looking forward to receiving more applications and encourage you to apply if you haven't already. Exactly. You've hit the nail on the head. It's every 3 years.
Is there any due date for the applications?
Yeah, anytime anyone wants to make an application. Yep. You might have heard of the Care Finder program that helps older people to get access to care. And they can also call My Aged Care. There's a phone number as well. The Care Finders program is intended to help people who don't have support and who have extra needs to gain access to aged care. It's certainly acknowledged that many older people aren't tech savvy and don't have a computer. There's a period where AHA will keep the application open for a while, and we'll work with the provider to get the evidence. If they're not getting much out of a provider, they might eventually have to close it, but they're very committed to working with providers to help them get the information that they need. But I'd have to get back to you about what exactly their cutoff is. You might have heard of the star ratings that's come in to rate aged care providers against different criteria. So that is one of the main transparency responses of the Royal Commission recently.
We do have a training, so which is like especially is like helping you like how you can apply the culturally and linguistically diverse part of it. So we are helping you, just giving a culturally inclusive service delivery. But also, Isolde, if I'm not wrong, sector support development officers are helping the individual organizations to apply the specialisation verification, isn't it?
They do in Victoria, yeah. And possibly other states as well. We do know that there's a lot of reforms underway, obviously, and you're really busy. And there's sometimes some staff turnover. We're also aware that you might not be aware about specialisation verification because you've got your day-to-day work as well as keeping on top of all of the reforms, some of which are mandatory and this one is not mandatory. So we have a small sense of what some of the barriers might be, but really curious to hear from you. I think the Northern Territory doesn't have very many specialised culturally and linguistically diverse services. In general, it's got many First Nations ones, but not many culturally and linguistically diverse ones. But we're certainly keen to get that number up. Yeah, that's a really important question. It is by office, so for that very reason that it needs to be tailored to the local area. So each office needs to put in their own application through the process so that it's accurate.
Thank you so much for the insightful information, Isolde.